I unabashedly put my hand up for things I'm not qualified for, like different types of companies that I have no background in. So it kind of puts me in a position where I'm honestly coming from a place where I'm like, I don't know, someone help me out here. And where I have had the most success is when I looked it in the face and dealt with it very bluntly, which I don't think is my natural state. And it's something that I have to work on, but it's also something that everyone should have.
Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Lourdes Juan, co-founder and CEO of Knead Tech. Lourdes is an award-winning Canadian entrepreneur and urban planner who has founded a diverse array of companies and organizations in urban planning, food security, hospitality, food and climate tech, to name a few. Given her commitment to community advocacy, including planning and design, affordable housing, and entrepreneurship, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Lourdes. You are an urban planner by trade, and yet you've built such a diverse portfolio beneath you. So walk us through, how did you come up with all those brilliant ideas?
Well, thank you for that kind intro. I do have a master's in environmental design, specifically focused in urban planning. And it was sort of like my first love. Like I definitely fell in love with how cities work, how they function, what makes a city have a certain characteristic or personality. Like I really gravitated toward that. But within planning, there's so many different things that make the city tick. There's small businesses and what they have to offer. There's social planning, there's politics, there's all these sort of inputs that make a city what it is. And I think I originally was interested in urban planning. I still hold that hat with one of my companies, but really got more interested in the social side of things and impact. And so started a charity, which I thought kind of would be just a small charity that I would start, and I would sort of be picking up and dropping off food from grocery stores and bakeries, and I would always drop that food off to service agencies that need it. Intended it just to be sort of like a small volunteer thing. But when I really saw the need of how much food goes to waste and how many people don't have access to food and how, we could actually get good food to people just within Calgary, I really started going down that path. So it's a longer story, but it sort of has led me to now having a tech company that focuses on food rescue.
Kudos to you for the impact that you're making. And I wanted to dive a little bit more into the whole concept of, when you're navigating your career and you're like, there are so many problems that I could solve. And yet trying to, one, figure out what you want to solve for. And then secondly, like, how do I articulate what I can bring to the table if I bring so many different skills?
Right.
What did that look like for you to figure out, what? This is where I want to play in the most.
I think as a planner, we are trained with the skill set to really take a look at things from like a macro level. So really kind of like zoom out and say, okay, these are the resources that are needed to go into this. This is what this could look like 10, 50, 100 years from now. And so I think looking at, it doesn't matter what problem you're solving, but looking at problems or looking at anything you want to tackle, whether it's like a small business or if it's, a larger, more complex social issue, you're kind of like still looking at that from the same lens. And to me, that's the lens that I learned through urban planning.
I appreciate that insight. And before I dive into one of the social issues that you solve for, I wanted to ask you, how do you effectively lead the leader within, especially given the complexity of the problems that you have to solve for?
I certainly don't do it alone. So I think one of my strengths is I love working on teams, particularly really good teams who also like working in social impact because there's this extra kind of like drive and ambition with those types of folks. So I certainly really like collaborating. I think that's one of like those tenements that I like to do. But I think generally, like if I were to very much simplify this, I don't have all the answers. I think, the curse of being an urban planner is kind of like, yes, we can see things a very bird's eye view, but at the same time, like it's really difficult for me to kind of get into the operations and nitty gritty of things and kind of understand how to make something work. And so I rely on other people's brains and other people who also want to work on similar causes. And so I put a lot of emphasis and I put a lot of time, effort into the teams that I build. And that has certainly been a leadership quality that I think I have honed over the last few years, and certainly something that I want to continue to develop.
I respect that answer. And I would be curious, as you reflect back on your leadership journey, what is one story that has really shaped how you lead your team, especially if they might not be as comfortable with uncertainty as you are?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of taken back to when I was fundraising. And I had never fundraised in a company before. So Knead Technology is my tech company. That's my sixth venture, whether I started nonprofits and for-profits. Knead was the first company that I needed to raise money for through investors, through angel investors, through traditional VCs, venture capital money. And I think I didn't take my own advice at first. Like I was very much operating in a silo, thinking that this was on me to raise, and it was really difficult. I say the stat all the time, but 2% of venture money goes to women, and a fraction of that percent goes to women that look like me. And so it was one thing to kind of hear that statistic, but thinking, I've had 5 successful ventures. I can totally do this. To be that statistic and not, get the fundraising in the time that I thought I would, or just not be successful and kind of fight this uphill battle every day was really difficult. And so I didn't really take my own advice at first. I did not collaborate. I kept everything to myself. I was very insular about the fundraise and how that was going. And I think that the lack of transparency really did me. And so I think I had to reflect on 2 things: on what successful leadership in my experience has been, and that has been to collaborate, that has been to be transparent. And I wasn't doing those things. So that was something I needed to change. And then the second big part of that was really to separate myself from my company and separate myself from my fundraise, that it does not make me less of an entrepreneur, less of a CEO, or less of a co-founder if I cannot fundraise. We'll just have to figure out a different way to do it. It ended up being a good news story. I did end up closing my fundraising round. It took 3 times longer than I thought it would, but it got done.
I respect the amount of awareness, willing to do something about the epiphany that you got. And then on top of that, securing that funding, especially with the statistic that you already shared. It's like a huge kudos to you and
Thank
your
you.
team. And speaking of the impact that you and your team have, I actually have notes here because I was very impressed by the numbers. And I'm sure this is just a fraction of what you've all done. But since starting in 2022, Tech has impacted Calgary and beyond in the following way: 2 million pounds of surplus food rescued, 1.67 million meals distributed. This is equivalent to a carbon dioxide reduction of roughly 56 cars being removed from the road each year, and water savings equal to 200 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Let that stat sink in for one moment. Those are incredible numbers because I'm always curious about what the heck does it actually take to make that impact happen, and to ensure that the systems around you, if they're not working for you, you navigate it in a way that, okay, we're going to figure out this new path together. So what did it look like for you and your team when you think back to might be the biggest aha moment that allowed us to do that?
Yeah, thank you for listing those. And I apologize if those are on the website. We are so behind because I think just last quarter, I got the stats this morning. Just last quarter, we did just over £1 million. Or we didn't, but we facilitated the software for our customers to do that. So it has been this growing journey of impact, which is what we're here for. I mean, it's why I wanted to work in social impact, particularly in food rescue. I think it kind of just goes back to collaboration. When we think of tech companies, especially me at first, I did not really think that there was so much sort of customer discovery and customer back and forth. But because we are close to our customers and you build this relationship, particularly with customers who are nonprofits and food banks and food rescue organizations or funders for those types of agencies, it's a really small pool, and you kind of really fight for this cause together. Doesn't matter what hat you're wearing, whether you're in the nonprofit seat or if you're the tech company providing software or if you're a government or municipality. So we all get to kind of rally together to create those numbers at the end of the day. But I think when it comes to the tech solution, I think I did over 227 or something customer discovery calls to understand where people were in their food rescue journey and make sure that we had a product that would work for them. And so most of our team comes from food rescue, particularly the co-founding team. So it took sort of our boots on the ground experience, prior experience, plus having, not me, but my team having a technical background to kind of put something together that works for the customers. And so it just kind of all goes back to working working together and not siloing ourselves from each other. It doesn't matter what sort of sector you're from. Everyone can kind of be working on the same cause.
I appreciate that collaborative approach and the fact they made over 227 calls and ensuring that whatever product that you put out there is solving for the right things. And along the way, how did you navigate all that noise in your head?
It was easier to do it with the team. I think like we all bring different skill sets. Like if we look at even just our co-founding team, one person is very, very technical, our CTO. The other actually comes from like a theater background and then got her MBA. The other comes from an oil and gas background and got his MBA, and my background sits kind of everywhere. And so I think having like different inputs and then kind of trying to sit with those and filter those out and see what opportunities we should go for, what we should say no to, and what we should say yes to. I have less of an agency to say no. It's something I think that is like a work in progress, but my team is really good at kind of filtering some of that noise out. And so I certainly like rely on them. But I will, there is a bit of like intuition, which I never want to downplay, but I also don't want to put too much emphasis on it. So it's like a fine balance. But I feel like maybe it's just part of the work that we do of like what's going to sell, what's not going to sell, how I could talk to this person, how I could not talk to this person, like those types of things. I think that's a gut feeling that I'm fairly in tune with.
Speaking of the saying no piece, I feel like a lot of high performers sometimes have to work through that, and it's always a work in progress as well.
Right.
How do you effectively keep your quote unquote North Star in mind and then who you are as a person, all while ensuring that the team is clear? Okay, this is what we're working towards. And as the noise comes, this is how you can filter through it.
I think there's like a couple tactical things we do. Like we have a strategy session where we have one like more than I would like sometimes. Like I'm like, is it strategy time again? I have to get some work done. I think we like have a good strategy cadence. So like the team from Edmonton comes down to Calgary and then we like really work through some of those like North Star pieces just to make sure. And we look at the data. What did we do, let's say in 2025? Where did the revenue come from? Who did it come from? Like, let's look at the raw data and then we can start to analyze, are we following our North Star? Did we kind of veer off? Those types of things. So I think there's some like real tactical things that we do, like strategy session every 6 months, but we do it as an entire team. And then I also do it with like the sales team. So I do feel like we meet often to kind of talk about, at least like look at the North Star and see. But I do think like the personal stuff like kind of meshes in with the business stuff because like I have a toddler I'm expecting. I'm in my second trimester. And so there are things that are just like actual boundaries. And I think that helps me as well not kind of veer too far in like on different tangents. And it kind of helps me stay a little bit focused because the reality is I don't have the time. And so I have to say no to a lot of things and I have to like really put my boundary up. And if I'm saying yes to so many things, I'm saying no to my family, which like is my personal North Star. And so I have to remind myself of that. It's just something that I think comes naturally, particularly when you have a family and when you're expecting it. You physically and emotionally and mentally carry everything when it comes to like just women in general, when it comes to having a family, but then also having a business.
A huge congratulations on the
Thank
new
you.
addition to your family. And I was chatting with another individual and they talked about how our society is built in a way where it expects people to work like they don't parent, but to
Yeah.
parent like they don't work. So it's like you deal with a lot of stuff both at work, at home, and whatever it may be. And as an entrepreneur, that's further amplified because I don't think you always have the luxury of turning off your brain. So
For
I would
sure.
be curious for you as you continue to build your family and your business. What's one thing that really helps you have that mental clarity to navigate it all while being kind to yourself?
I follow a routine. I know when I'm off my routine because I'm just the crankiest person you'll ever meet. But I really do need that and my toddler loves a routine. And so we certainly try to follow like cadence that works for us. We travel a lot, or we have been traveling a lot, and we still try to keep to a similar routine regardless of what city we're in. He usually comes with me on my trips. So I think he's 4. He's taken 68 flights in his very short life. But I just feel like I have office days, I have work from home days, I have meeting days, I have heads down working days. Like those are very sacred, and I make better decisions when I'm coming from a place of routine. And I just definitely know that about myself, having my own businesses now since 2010. And so this is like, almost 16 years of this. And I'm still learning every day, but what I have learned for sure is that I need to keep that routine. It helps with my mindset, and it helps with my habits.
I think it's so cute that your toddler has been able to travel with you. And when you talk about those time blocks, I think sometimes entrepreneurs and leaders get caught in the trap of, I've built it in, but other fires are burning, and then your attention turns, and then that time block disappears.
Yeah.
So for you, how do you stay disciplined and saying, you know what, I will not shift this and I will only focus on this?
I think it's a matter of like writing down your priorities and sticking to them. So if the fire is my son needs to be picked up from school, I am 100% there, and I have to shift my day into the evening or to the early morning. If the fire is not as important and it's not something that I need to rush to, I think I really need to look at if that can be done the next day. But I think I've learned to be a lot more like less reactive in my leadership and in entrepreneurship in general. Like, we are not curing cancer. We are not performing heart surgery every day. Things can wait until tomorrow, probably. So with a bit more years under my belt, I've certainly learned to be less reactive, more proactive, and kind of see things coming rather than having to just run around like a chicken with my head cut off. Not that those days don't happen. They certainly do, but I take them, I think, with a bit more grace.
Something you touched on there that I want to dive a little bit deeper to is the whole reactivity versus proactivity piece. I think part of it has to do with potentially systems thinking and being able to see that bird's level eye view. The other part of it, I think, is around asking yourself, okay, what is important versus urgent? When you think about your journey, if you're to look back and offer yourself a piece of advice as to how to actually put that into practice, what advice would you offer yourself?
I started to change something about my routines and everything. This is a funny story, actually. When I own a spa downtown, I racked up like an insane amount of parking tickets. And it was so symbolic of me just like running around, parking wherever I wanted, not paying for parking, parking in like no parking zones, just being a total a-hole about getting to the spa on time and opening the door and like, doing the treatments and running the bookkeeping and working the front desk and then like leaving and then going home and trying to eat and coming back and having a partner. Like all of the things I think were like sucking up this like graceful air that like I think is maybe my more natural state. But like I kind of think about those times and that moment, like that was like 15, 16 years ago. And then like having progress and learning every year. And so what I started to do, like after I kind of realized like this is crazy, this is like self-inflicted stress, and it does not need to happen like this. I started writing down my priorities, and those priorities got clearer and easier to define as I like got married and built a family. For me anyways, it might be different for other folks, but I know that, writing down those priorities, like kids come first. So if I have an appointment or if my son needs something, like that's kind of where I am. My family comes second. If my mom needs me to drive her somewhere or something like that will have the priority. And then it's sort of like, in business, if it's not a sales meeting or a sales call, it can probably wait or get kind of bumped down. And so those are kind of like I set those priorities for myself, and they change every 6 months. They can change every year. They can change every 6 months. But I think kind of like going back to those and understanding what those are can really help define what your calendar looks like, what your day looks like, and how you handle stress going forward.
You made it work, right, through all those parking tickets. And I love the fact that you did that
It
brain
was
dump.
very embarrassing how much, like, my brother-in-law, who was part of that company at the time, he was like, we're not paying these. Like, you have to just have your car parked and take the bus for 3 months because this is... And it was a lesson to be learned in my 20s, but it got done. I know, it was so irresponsible, let me tell you.
I appreciate that transparency and that story, and it just showcased the human behind like what is required to make it work as well. Something that I wanted to touch on is the whole being able to think at that really high level and then also the systems thinking required to solve for complex problems. Systems thinking continues to be something that pops up as a future of work skill that is really necessary. So can you walk us through like how you developed that way of thinking and how you continue to prioritize that?
Yeah, and social impact is very inherent that you have to have systems thinking. I remember starting one of the nonprofit social enterprises that's still running today called Fresh Fruits, and it's an affordable mobile grocery store. And they retrofit like buses and vans to kind of take affordable food, nutritious food into communities that live in food deserts, sell that food at an affordable price. And there's kind of this whole food dignity model. And I remember it starting from social workers, them reaching out to me saying, you work in kind of food rescue. Is there anything nutritious in what you're getting that we can kind of distribute to seniors? Because they don't want to go to the food bank, or they can't get to the food bank, or they're ineligible. Um, but then they also want more like fresh food. And so how do we kind of bring that here? And so from the very beginning, there's so many stakeholders involved. And I think that was like my first lesson in systems thinking. How can we involve a bunch of different people from a bunch of different areas in this work? And it was like City of Calgary social workers. It was the City of Calgary and their affordable housing department that allowed us to get access to seniors that were in need. It was the seniors telling us what food that they wanted. That got extended to like Indigenous communities and learning about like Indigenous culturally appropriate food and the equipment that they have and the types of appliances they have in their homes to cook the food or lack thereof. And so we had to understand what all of these small pieces and what all of these stories look like to understand how a system for dignified food access could function, and how that could function properly, and how that could function for people that need food. So we worked through that and then came up with this food dignified approach. And that means that the food that folks get is affordable. It shows up right at their doorstep, so it's convenient. It is culturally appropriate, so it'll look different depending on the different areas that the mobile grocery store stops at, or the mobile market stop at. And then my favorite sort of part of all of this learning was like that there's no proof of income, that you don't need to like prove how poor you are before you get access to food. And I think that was like a really big aha moment for me. And, you take all of that and you really start looking at this work as like food systems work, and how do we continually improve it and make it better. And our North Star is like our theory of change. And so what do we want to change when it comes to food access? And to us that was food dignity, and that was making sure people had access to things that they wanted and that they could afford and that they could get right at their doorstep.
Kudos to your team, because I was reading online the fact that you can maintain that anonymity really helps with that dignity component. And if we even thinking about how you tie urban planning into all the work that you do as well, I was reading, imagine if you can't get to a grocery store that has healthy food that is maybe 50 kilometers away, and then the most accessible thing is like fast food. How does that impact the standard of living and stuff? And then there's the policy side of things. So there's just so many layers to that. So
Yeah.
again, congratulations to you and your team.
Yeah, and that kind of like urban planning lens. I mean, this is like nothing's going to be solved overnight, but like I talk about this often. It's like, for the most part, most North American cities are planned where discount grocery stores are on the periphery of the city. And we have populations within the inner city that can't get there. And so they are saddled with fast food or expensive food. And that was like an urban planning decision that was like completely unfair, and that they had no say in, that they had no part of. And so it's things like that's part of like the system. Like, how do we go in and start to affect change in this work? And it takes all of those different hats and all of these different sectors working on it.
Okay, last question before we slowly wrap up on this note is looking back at your journey, understanding you're working within a system, when you encounter friction, which generally happens with people or a lot of bureaucracy, what is one lesson you've learned to effectively navigate that?
To effectively navigate friction.
Yes, the friction within the
Yeah.
system.
I mean, I think I'm lucky because I like unabashedly put my hand up for things I'm not qualified for, like different types of companies that I have no background in. So it kind of puts me in a position where The friction's always kind of like, I'm honestly coming from a place where I'm like, I don't know, someone help me out here. So a lot of the friction that I have experienced has been there. I have had like some other serious friction, and where I have had the most success is when I looked it in the face and dealt with it very bluntly, which I don't think is my like natural state. And it's something that I have to work on, but it's also something that everyone should have. I joke with my husband because he is from the Maritimes and he grew up, he's very open about this. He grew up in a trailer park in the Maritimes, and he's probably like the most blunt person I know. Like, he will never massage any words. And at first I like found it very abrupt, but over the years I have found that to be so endearing, and I prefer that sort of way now. That sort of like communication that's not rude, just like very honest and very blunt. And I sort of like channel that kind of confidence in my work. But also when we think about having a family, I want my kids to be that honest. Like, I don't want them to be pushed around or pushed over. Like, I want them to be like very, very like straightforward. And I think that's something that can help like rip the Band-Aid off. And actually, I think it can help ease friction at the end if you're just very honest and communicate very clearly and very properly. It just helps things in the end. It's something that I'm like working on and learning, but I have found more success when I'm just more blunt and direct. My co-founder said something like, no is a full sentence. What is that? And I was like, that's going to be on my grave. Like, no is a full sentence. And I sort of like taken that into my work.
I was just chuckling at the whole no is a full sentence because I hear you loud and clear. And again, it's much easier said than done because some days I'm
Totally.
like, let's substitute with a comma. Other days I'm like, okay, fine, actual period. One thing that I noticed about you is you are really good in the gray and with the discomfort, whatever you say, of the uncertainty. Even like you said, you know what? I saw the value of having someone that's like clear, direct, blunt. I was able to translate that. I have no business going to like this business and running it, but I did so. So if you were to look back at your career and give yourself one final piece of advice where you're like, hey, Lourdes, you freaking kicked ass there, and I hope you remember this, what would that one statement be?
It would be to celebrate the wins, big and small. This is a silly example, but like I would get an award and just be like, okay, cool. We have work to do. Like, what's next on the docket sort of thing. And have been unable to really appreciate and celebrate that win, particularly when it has to do with me. And I think it's because in the world of social impact, there's just so much to do. And while I feel that we have made incremental change and like small steps in my lifetime, these problems are not going to be like where I want them to be. And so I think I pushed myself too far in that direction to just kind of be like more. And I don't get to kind of sit down and sit back and revel in the wins a little bit. And so if I were to give myself any piece of advice from a long time ago, it would be like to celebrate just the smallest things.
I love that. So as we wrap up our conversation, what is one thing we can either celebrate with you on or to help you on?
To celebrate. This goes back to what we were just talking about, where it's difficult for me to celebrate. Okay, well, the help is easy. I think that food rescue can really become commonplace, and I really want that to be kind of like a term, or food recovery or something like that, we take into the future. I think it's an important part of a sustainable ecosystem for our planet is making sure we don't waste food. And so I would like have everyone listening or taking away from this podcast that, we can make sure that we don't waste food, whether it's in our own homes, where we work, that sort of thing. I kind of always bring it back to my team, but I'd like to celebrate that we're a small and mighty team of 8 people at Knead. We have not really grown the team, maybe by like a couple people, 1 or 2 people per year. But I think that really shows a lot of resilience, and that there are sort of like these big things coming up for us in 2026. And hoping that everyone kind of follows our journey.
Well, Lourdes, thank you so much for sharing that. And now people have ample opportunity to understand how they can continue to help and celebrate with you. So thank you again for sharing your story and your insights. To everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know, and I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode.